Teachers, what's your most memorable, oh boy, that student definitely isn't going places moment? Story 1. This isn't really the kids' faults, more the parents, but the sister teaches in Hong Kong, generally 3 to 4 year olds, and she had this one kid, called Enzo, if I remember correctly, kept acting out, completely ignoring my sister and her TA when they spoke to him, and doing badly in the class work they're given. He also didn't speak, like, at all, tended to play by himself. So my sister called his parents in to discuss it, voiced her concerns that there might be behavioral problems, maybe something deeper seated. His parents then confided in her that it's probably not that, more that the kid didn't speak a lick of English or Cantonese, that is, the two languages used in the school, and most of Hong Kong. They were both relatively affluent Italians, so they'd raised the kid speaking Italian, and lied that he spoke English fluently so he could get admitted into the school, as it was a requirement that they have a basic understanding, if I recall correctly. My sister raised her concerns with the principal after she had the meeting, and they responded to just moving the kid to another class. She said she still sees him sitting alone during lunch breaks. I really feel for the kid, though. He's only young, and he's pretty much been alienated, and won't learn properly because his parents are so dead set on shoving him into the most expensive school, assuming he'll learn well. Story 2. Czech class. It was the ultimate test for if I really wanted to be a teacher or not. In my final year of teachers college, second grade, there were the usual few troublemakers, some suck-ups, some sad stories, but mostly just average kids. Except those two. Those two made it a heck of a class. Both boys. Boy 1 was hyperactive, stubborn as heck, violent to both students and teachers, once punched my mentor teacher in the face while I was there, breaking her glasses, and just generally a handful. Both boys were given special schedules, which meant they were on the iPads most of the day. If you told boy 1 it was time to do work instead of playing on the iPad, he lost it every time. Every single freaking time. This happened about 5 to 10 times a day, depending on how much we wanted to fight him. Boy 2 was almost worse. No emotion, no impulse control, nothing. Just a blank slate of anger and venom. He screamed, he destroyed school property, he forced the whole class to evacuate on 2 occasions. He was no longer allowed on field trips because he would run away, forcing the teacher to chase him. He thought it was funny. He did a lot of things he thought were funny. Hint, it never was. I thank God he was never physically violent because he was such a huge kid that he would have seriously hurt someone. It's not that these kids were going nowhere, they were going to jail, probably sooner rather than later. Story 3. I have a winner. The class was an applied math course for high schoolers, and we held a paper airplane design contest. The rule was that you could use anything on the table to make your airplane, and that the person who threw theirs the farthest down the hallway would win. The table had all manner of things on it. Printed paper, construction paper, tape, rulers, compasses, toothpicks, duct tape, paper clips, masking tape, a stapler, and even Elmer's glue. Well, the class went to work and for an hour designed some very interesting planes. Except for Tim. Tim sat quietly and chatted with his friends until about 30 seconds were left to build. Then he went up to the table, grabbed a few things, and sat back down to wait. When it came time to throw, he turned out his plane, and it was a piece of paper wrapped around the stapler. While the lighter and more complex planes drifted to the sides and landed early or hit the hallway walls, Tim's plane slammed straight into the door on the other side of the hall, with a satisfying clunk. Tim's ridiculous creation beat everyone else out and won the contest easily, while technically obeying the rules of the competition. I hope that guy ends up working for NASA. He waited until the last minute in order to A. not get told no, and B. not let any classmates copy his master plan. This wasn't Tim's first trip around the block. Story 4. Blatant and obvious low-effort plagiarism. Like it's literally the first Google result if you search topic example essay. But they added their name in a different font and size, which should make it obvious at a glance, as if the use of capitalization and punctuation wasn't a dead giveaway that they didn't write it. I had a student pull that last year, while his even dumber buddy didn't even put his name on it. In fact, it wasn't even an essay. It was a selection of question prompts. Basically 2 Kevins in one class. I also had a kid at the very end of the day continually mess around with his skateboard and become very hostile when I insisted on holding it until the last bell. He ran out the door, jumped on it, and completely fell and broke his jaw. His parents then threatened to sue the school because he got hurt there doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. Yep, I've seen that sort of plagiarism from university students, and they were genuinely put off when their assignment wasn't accepted for some mysterious reason. Story 5. Okay, so I had a student in middle school that couldn't read. That wasn't a huge deal. Kid had issues. Once he got angry at me and told me he was going to rip off my buttons. It may have been literal or figurative, didn't matter. Remember, issues. It was my job to teach him to read. He should have already been in high school. He was 14 and in middle school. I worked individually with this kid every day. Finally, I just asked him what he was going to do for a living if he couldn't read and wouldn't try. He gave me a pretty standard answer. I'll play basketball or sell drugs. I should mention he was barely over 5 feet tall. I worried about him. He was my student for 2 years. Eventually he moved on and I switched to high school. So 20 years later, I get curious. I remember most of my students, and this kid had a name that stood out quite a bit. I Google his name, hoping he won't be in prison. A lot of my former students are. I found him right away. He's a professional basketball player for Ukraine. Retired now, but still. So good for him. Made himself proud. Unexpected happy ending. Story 6. My mom was a substitute for 5th grade teachers. She told me how this one kid had so many anger issues. This kid would be sitting in his desk playing Legos or something, then out of nowhere flip the desk, start punching the other kids while screaming at the top of his lungs. He also wasn't a small kid, and my mom isn't a big person. So when my mom tried to calm him down, he only got more angry and ripped a necklace off of her and tackled her to the floor, which was when 3 other grown men pulled the kid off of her. She got to go home early and get paid for the necklace that was broken. You think someone would find out that this kid was mentally handicapped before 5th grade. It'd be interesting to learn what kind of things actually made him tick. Story 7. Here's one from my mom. The class ate at one of those medieval-themed restaurants on a field trip, and one little brat took advantage of the setting and the overflowing cleavage. He referred to the waitress as his wench and demanded she butter his bread, all so she would bend over to better reveal her bountiful bosom. He ordered the turkey legs, then wielded them theatrically like Henry VIII, while thanking the waitress for giving him a bone. When my mom got home, she said he was a harassment lawsuit waiting to happen. He ordered the turkey legs, then wielded them theatrically like Henry VIII. This is the only part of the story that I condone. Story 8. My mom has taught special education for the last 12 or 13 years, so all of her students have been variously interesting. One of the more notable stories was about a boy who would just nonstop masturbate in class. Not being loud or disruptive about it, just sitting there with his hand in his pocket, jerking off through his pants. All classes, every class. He only stopped ever during lunch. They banned him from wearing sweatpants and wouldn't let him go to the bathroom alone, so he couldn't touch himself as easily. He just switched from jerking off to talking about his penis. He wasn't being abused or molested, as far as anyone knew. He just had a fixation. Don't know what ultimately happened to him. Kid in my class in middle school was spied ejaculating on a calculator during math class. It was one of the shared calculators from the class set, too, not a personal one. Story 9. Used to teach English in Japan. Had a 12-year-old kid who would take off his socks and chew on his toenails in the middle of my lessons. Had a 4-year-old kid who would run at top speeds towards the wall, throw himself into it, stumble around going ouch for a few seconds, then do it all again for an hour straight if we would let him. Had a 7-year-old who stripped off down to his underpants, then skipped around the room singing the Pokemon theme song for the whole class. Finally got him dressed again just as the lesson ended. He looked up at me and said in complete seriousness, "Sensei, I did a good job." Kids, man, they're weird. Story 10. In the last few weeks before the AP exam, I give my classes a series of practice tests, written by College Board, to take in class under a time constraint to give them practice. One student, let's call him Bill, always tried to cheat in my class. I had gotten sick of putting in the effort to catch him, and it didn't matter because the entire point of the class was to prepare for the AP exam. Bill started off each test by staring at the page and answering 1 or 2 questions. Then, as always, he asked to go to the bathroom during the test. I let him go, and he took his phone, of course. He returns and frantically bubbles in the rest of the test and turns it in early. I have to hand it to him. Bill was great at memorizing letters for the answers of the practice tests, but he failed the AP exam. Story 11. I had my students write 2 truths and a lie so the class could get to know one another better. One student writes, I had 4 concussions. I play hockey. I have gold. He said that the lie is that he has gold. I told our phys ed teacher about it at lunch, and she says, what does he mean he has gold? I said, well, that was the lie. Well then, he lied twice because he's had 7 concussions. No wonder he's so slow. I mean, he has had 4 concussions. 4 is a subset of 7, making both statements true. He just can't have over 7 without making it false. If I have $1 million, saying I have $1 is entirely true. Story 12. On the first day after going over the syllabus, I had a little intro to college talk I would give first semester students. I know how boring a syllabus is, so I would touch on some of the most important aspects of it, like attendance and late work, in a less formal discussion to grab the students' attention. Part of this was something along the lines of, you're now in college and you are an adult. I don't know your parents' phone number and I will not call them if you miss a day or don't turn in your work. You are now responsible for your own future. Right when I said that, a few students would get up and leave, never to be seen again. I respect their audacity. Story 13. A university freshman turned in a paper on the Treaty of Versailles that conformed to no known formatting system I had ever seen. There didn't even seem to be paragraphs. Assuming that his computer had jumbled it up somehow when he turned it in, I went to give it back to him in class one day so he could fix it. He informed me it was intentional. The format meant the paper was to be read as a rap, which he proceeded to do for me in the few minutes before class started. It was incredible. D+. Story 14. I assigned students to do a group presentation of a story from mythology at the end of the school year. I told them they could choose Greek, Roman, Egyptian, Norse, or any other system they chose. 2 students chose a story from Norse mythology about Thor. They presented the story, which included characters like Loki, Captain America, Iron Man, etc., completely seriously. I spoke to them at the end of the class, and they had no clue that Marvel Cinematic Universe was not a part of Norse mythology. They should have said it was on American mythology. Story 15. One of the fellas in my university first-year computer programming class stared at the wall at the same spot. The whole class, every class. He'd walk in on time, sit down, open his folder, and stare at the wall, and didn't ever take a note that I saw. At the end of the wall-staring duration of the class, he'd close his likely still blank folder, get up, and leave without a word. I see him from time to time at the grocery store collecting up the carts. I feel a little bad for whoever funded his education, but am pleased that he has a steady job. Story 16. Been a history teacher for 3 months and was teaching about the Middle Colonies and how it was the breadbasket of America. The next day, as a warm-up, I ask what the breadbasket is. She raised her hand and, without her even skipping a beat, starts going off about how I'm so dumb because it's called the chicken basket, where you get your tenders 2 sides and it also comes with bread, but that isn't what it's called. This poor girl has a lot more stories. This one is the one that stands out to me the most. I thought it was the Great American Melting Pot. Story 17. I work with 3-year-olds. One was crying and pointing at another kid, so I asked what happened. She mostly speaks Spanish, but understands English, so I started asking her, "Are you hurt?" "Yes." "Did she hurt you?" "Yes." "Did she kick you?" "Yes." Then the other child chimes in, "Nuh-uh, I didn't kick her, I just punched her in the face." Story 18. When I was in high school, a girl, who wasn't exactly known for academic excellence, in my world history class, gave a presentation on concentration camps. It was going pretty smoothly until she was showing pictures of the crematoria and said, "And this is where the prisoners made their bread for the day." It was so stunningly awkward that my teacher had to make her stay after class for what I'm sure was the most painful conversation of his career. I still think about that a lot. Story 19. Kindergarten teacher, testing students on community helpers, asked a student to name 3 community helpers. Child responds, "Firefighter man." Now I really thought, yes, she's got this in the bag. "A hot dog and a monkey." Yeah, no. Bless your brain, though. As a firefighter, I have several colleagues who I would gladly exchange for a trained monkey. Story 20. My 8th grade physical science lab partner took the top off of one of those oil burners, poured the oil all over our desk, and then lit it on fire, like on purpose. Did you think it would be less flammable because it's on the table now? Hilariously, even though I was the one who put the fire out and had nothing to do with the lighting, I still got suspended too. I guess the lesson I was supposed to learn was never to help put out a fire. Story 21. I was subbing in a third grade class, and as a reward, I was told I could draw a quick quiz card and ask a question to a student. The student could earn points to be used in the class store by answering the question. So I asked this very sweet little girl how many states of the US she could name, worth 1 point each. She sat there thinking with a big smile on her face for about 15 seconds before emphatically stating, Wednesday. Story 22. The last intelligent member of my geography class stole my homework assignment from my bag and tried to hand it in as his own. I told the teacher after class, and she looked through the pile and said, "Don't worry." He didn't even attempt to remove my name from the paper. He basically just handed my homework in for me. And that's how he will never be caught even if accused. The perfect crime. Story 23. I work as a bouncer, and on Saturday, some girl was persistently trying to get into my bar, but looked young and didn't have ID with her. After telling her no about 30 times and her complaining about everyone hating on her, a guy walked in and told us he's one of her high school teachers and that she's 17. She took off awfully quick when he showed up, and I can only imagine how things went in school today. Story 24. 3 third-grade boys stole an answer book from me for their reading test, which consisted of 18 multiple-choice questions and 2 essay questions. They all aced the multiple-choice questions, but had the exact same answers on the essay questions. Student answers may vary. Well, it did say may. Story 25. A guy in my class was asked by the German teacher what kind of music he listens to, trying to make a good impression. He said he liked classical music. The teacher asked him to name his favorite composer. He answered, piano. Ludwig von Piano. Story 26. I had a middle school student, not even old enough to drive himself, bring a dog to class in his coat pocket. I think the parents had to come get it after third period. It went potty. Same child also tried to save ice cream for after school in his locker. He was not special ed either. Story 27. In one of my health, sex ed classes, a girl in my class said she wasn't afraid of getting AIDS, because if she got it, she'd just give it to someone else, and therefore not have it. Yeah, that was an interesting day once we realized she was serious. Story 28. I deliver educational inductions on different topics to students, and we ask them to fill out comment forms after. One student, under the heading, "What did you find least useful?" wrote, "A bit about the books." Then, under why, he put, "Because who the frick reads anymore? Some kids aren't going far." Story 29. A high school senior girl who didn't know how to add fractions told me that it was a waste of time. This was a month before she had to take her SATs, so she could apply to colleges. Side note, her mother would come in talking about getting her into top-tier schools and how bright she was. Story 30. Asked my student, 7th grade life science, why he has Fs in all of his classes, and why he doesn't bother to care about it. He proceeds to tell me with the most confident smile that he's making it into the NBA. That kid is now LeBron James. Story 31. As a getting to know you activity, I asked students, if you could be anyone in history, who would you be and why? One student's answer, Eleanor Roosevelt, because I've always wanted to be black. I think this one is my favorite. Story 32. Someone in my class genuinely believed that the Great Wall of China was in Berlin. Took everyone a couple of minutes to realize she was being dead serious. Click on one of the videos you see on the screen now, or a Karen will sue you.